there have been frequent attacks against Ahmadis and especially their places of worship. And in many cases, graveyards have also been desecrated. And what the mob is doing is they take objection to the fact that Ahmadis build their places of worship, which quote unquote look like mosques, in the sense that they have minarets. And one of the major demands then of these religious groups and people who are demolishing them is that these minarets should be removed, because the minarets are, in their opinion, an expression of Muslimness. That this is something which is closely tied with Islam. And since Ahmadis by law are not allowed to project themselves as Muslims or to show as if that they're part of the wider Muslim community, hence they are not allowed to borrow these symbols either, right? So while in the past we have seen that Ahmadis, there have been police cases registered against Ahmadis, they have been accused of blasphemy for carrying a copy of the scripture, for instance, for printing Bismillah on their wedding cards, for all sorts of different things. But these physical acts, of vandalism, there's something which is new. What's also new is the widespread geographical widespread nature of these acts, of these crimes. Whereas in the past, I would say mostly you would find people being becoming part of this anti-Ahmadi hatred, being localized to central Punjab. But now we see that in far off places, in areas which previously were not, which were unconcerned, so to speak, like about these issues, are now becoming increasingly involved. And you find places in Sindh, not just rural Sindh, but urban Sindh as well, Hyderabad, Karachi, where these acts of vandalism, of desecration have taken place. In all of this situation, we find that the police plays either as kind of like willing collaborators, or that they are unwilling to take any action. And one cannot blame them in that sense, that when they are confronted with a very aggressive, violent mob, their de facto mode is to step back, and they allow people to carry on with what they are doing. And in many cases, there is, since the demand is, since the religious groups demand that in any case Ahmadis should not have built these minarets, so they expect the police to help them demolish these structures, which they think are overtly Islamic in nature. So all of it links. It goes back to this history whereby the Ahmadis were branded as non-Muslims by the Pakistani Parliament in 1974, the famous Second Amendment, which was unanimously passed by the National Assembly, whereby the Ahmadis were declared as non-Muslims. But while in 1974 they were declared as non-Muslims for the purposes of law and constitution alone. And at that time, the religious groups who had been fighting for this, who had been making this demand since the creation of Pakistan, the assurance that they gave was that once the Ahmadis are declared as non-Muslims, it will become possible to protect their rights as a non-Muslim minority. That was the assurance that was given, that in order to protect the Ahmadis, we want this law so that the Ahmadis can live as Pakistani citizens, as a non-Muslim protected minority. But that has not happened. 74 became a starting point for a series of other activities and demands and pieces of legislation and ordinances. So it was followed by the more infamous Ordinance 20, which was promulgated by General Ziaul Haq in 1984, whereby the Ahmadis were the Ahmadi identity was inherently sort of criminalized, because Ahmadis claimed themselves to be Muslims, and the ordinance said that if an Ahmadi tries to pose, if Ahmadis try to pose themselves as Muslims, they will be punished. And subsequently, a series of court cases followed, which were consolidated and eventually they were decided by the Supreme Court in 1993, whereby the Ahmadi was framed as inherently a blasphemer, that an, an expression of Ahmadi faith, the court observed, was akin to an expression of blasphemy, you know. And at the same time, the political sort of like the loyalty of the Ahmadi was also put in question. That as if they are not sincere to this country. So in a way, what I'm trying to argue is that since the law, the constitution, the court identifies the Ahmadi as a potential blasphemer and a traitor. And the punishment for both these offenses is capital punishment. So you can imagine that in a way, the violence that we see against the Ahmadis, it's a legally sanctioned violence. And so in what the mob is doing is basically doing the law's work. I mean, in their from their point of view, the law is not being implemented. The constitution is not being followed in its true spirit. And it's basically then it's up to the mob then to fulfill the requirements of the law and to make sure that the constitution gets implemented, and then that in the sense that the Ahmadis are forcefully deprived, that the mob makes sure that the Ahmadis do not partake of the Muslims' claim to Islam, their copyright to Islam, and that they do not violate their they do not violate their property right in that sense. Which is again, it's a language which has been used by the Supreme Court to invalidate Ahmadi claim to Muslimness. So this is the historical context, and this is how in the recent past it has been taken to the next level, where it's no longer about it's no longer about a non-coercive, non-physical violent kind of like reaction towards the Ahmadis. It's now been it now has gone to the next level, where the Ahmadis are and they're even after death, the Ahmadis are being subjected to violence.